handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seattle. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seattle.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4-3-5, 9er-2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4-7-3, 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy that you could be with us. I'd like to give a big shout out to our digital flagship, talkamericaradio.us, and to our terrestrial flagship, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM, serving South Georgia. So we're very happy that we have their airtime and their support. It's been a very wonderful relationship. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming William Hazelgrove. He's a previous guest, a very accomplished author, national bestsellers, I might add. And he was kind enough to reach out to me about a week or so ago and send me his most recent book, which is on organized crime, the World's Fair. And the title is Al Capone and the 1933 World's Fair. I'm so thrilled with this because I used to live in Chicago. I was a little girl back then, so I'm very thrilled with this book. So, William, thank you for reaching out and sending me this book.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let me start off by asking you this kind of question. Was Chicago always corrupt and always a base for organized crime?
Well, it was a trading post when it first began. So probably, that sort of set the roots. And it just, people started to barter and trade. And then it became this sort of shipping hub with the Great Lakes. So, I think whenever you have a sort of central trading center, if you will, then probably corruption starts to creep in.
Especially where Chicago is, because as you mentioned, certainly with Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes, but it was kind of its gateway to the West.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and then you had the rail system.
That's right. You had the rail system, exactly. And as you said, it was a jumping off point for a lot of people heading west. I mean, Chicago was it was Springfield. They'd go there, and then they'd go off on the Oregon Trail. So, people think of Chicago, and let's face it, Al Capone, we might as well go there. He was the guy. And today, you can go anywhere in the world and say Al Capone, I don't care where it is, China, Malaysia, whatever, and they'll go bang, bang. Chicago. They just do.
And it's so, still a bang, bang, Chicago.
Right, exactly. And so, the point is that, this guy, and this is what's fascinating. Okay, this is from, the 1920s. And today, this is, mass media was just beginning. Today, he is as famous as any other icon in America. I mean, when you think about that in terms of name recognition, it's pretty amazing.
The other component in this, and it's something that, what we just chatted about with Chicago is something that's permeated through its history. It didn't just fall into history books because it just continued through Chicago. But one thing that did fall by the wayside, sadly so, and I would think with the technology revolution that we're having now, is the World's Fair. Those used to be amazing, spectacular events, and they have just gone down into the history books.
Yeah, exactly right. And as you said, it's because people can do things. Well, let's go back to the 1893 fair, made famous by Devil in the White City. That's the first fair they had in Chicago. And, and it was a big Beaux Arts fair, which means basically Chicago is trying to say we have culture and all these other things. Well, 40 years later, after that fair, Chicago decides to do it again. But what's different? We're in the Great Depression. You have Al Capone. St. Valentine's Day Massacre is in 1929. 7 men are gunned down. the people in Chicago, the mayor and everybody's freaking out. They're like, nobody's going to come to this fair unless we get rid of Capone. Now, the title is Al Capone and the 33 World's Fair. The reason I call it that is because they're linked. They had to get rid of him, or they couldn't, or nobody would come to this fair. Forget that it's the Great Depression. They don't have any money. They're like, how are we going to pull this thing off?
Crime
exactly. Now, you probably saw The Untouchables, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you still always want to see The Untouchables.
That's right. I mean, it's like, there's Elliot Ness and everybody else, getting Capone. Well, that whole story's made up.
Shucks.
Yes. A guy named William Fraley wrote that story when he bumped into Elliot Ness. Elliot Ness was a drinker. He was, an alcoholic, a depressive. He was a treasury agent, but there was no untouchable gang. But William Fraley in the 50s made this thing up, sold it to television, and then, of course, they sold it to the movies. Now, how did they really get Capone? This is where it gets interesting. In Chicago, 6 millionaires band together. Their name were the Secret Six.
Yeah,
and the Secret Six hired their own police force to get Capone.
Now, here's an interesting thing. We have this Rand woman.
Yes.
Now, what is her genesis? Is she the old Rand Corporation, Rand McNally, or just Rand?
No, not at all. Okay. Sally Rand her real name is Harriet Helen Beck. She's from the Ozarks. Poor girl, decides she wants to become famous, runs off, believe it or not, with the circus, with the carnival, comes back a few times, finally makes it to Hollywood, hooks up with Cecil B. DeMille. Cecil B. DeMille actually puts her in like 20 films, silent films. She is a star. She is headed that way. What happens? The talkies come in. A Birth of a Nation brings the talkies in. They do a sound test. She has a horrible lisp. DeMille gets rid of her. She then takes a bus to Chicago with her last money. All right, literally ends up sleeping in alleys and stuff, trying to find a job. Finally, there's a tryout at the Paramount. So she goes to a secondhand store, sees these 2 huge ostrich feathers. Right, grabs them, goes to the tryout. Her costume doesn't fit. The woman next to her says, "Well, just go on naked." So she does, and uses the ostrich feathers to sort of cover herself up. Right there, the Paramount hires her. Well, Sally Rand knows there is this World's Fair coming. This is a great scene. Okay, so the World's Fair is coming. Sally Rand wants to be part of this thing, right? She has to be part of it because she wants to be famous again. All right. So, but they won't let her. They won't hire her. She can't get near it. So on the opening night of the World's Fair, Sally Rand hires a guy and a white horse. Now the fair takes place on what's called Northerly Island. It's a little island right off the tip of Chicago. It's actually created by the Chicago Fire. They pushed all the debris out there and created this man-made island. Okay. Sally gets a boat on this horse, gets on the horse, basically naked, has face paint all over her body, takes the horse, the white horse, to the far side of the island, gets off in the middle of the fair. They're having the opening ceremony. She gallops through the fair, up onto the stage. All these photographers start snapping pictures. Her horse rears up. People think she's part of the World's Fair. She's arrested immediately, but they hire her. From that point on, Sally Rand and her feather dance becomes the #1 draw of the World's Fair. She makes $5,000 a week in Depression-era dollars.
Oh, stop it.
Mm-hmm.
You made this up.
No, it's true. You believe it?
No, I don't. I lived 6 years in Chicago.
I'm actually working up a proposal to write a book about her, too, because nobody's really written about her. And all right, so anyway, let's talk more about Sally Rand. So Sally Rand becomes the feather dancer at the World's Fair. You can go on YouTube and watch her dance, okay? And then after the World's Fair, she goes, back to Hollywood, makes a few movies, but still doesn't really click in Hollywood. Then she goes on the road for the rest of her life. And, sort of that, bunch of divorces, gets sued a bunch of times, always getting arrested for indecency. In the end, Sammy Davis Jr. has to give her $10,000 when she gets ill, because she's broke and living, in a very small home and stuff. I mean, so, it's sort of the rags to riches story, and then, of course, back down again. But she, again, like Capone, if you say to a lot of people, Sally Rand, they'll go, oh, let's talk about the name, because you asked about that. Her real name is, okay, like I say, Harriet Beck. Cecil B. DeMille goes, you know what? That's not going to work. He looks around his office and sees an atlas. He goes, Rand.
Yeah, okay.
Sally Rand. That's where her name came from.
Well, as a little anecdote, and I normally don't do this in interviews, I left Chicago, God, I forget what year, 63 or something. So I was quite young. Anyway, there was a big, huge shopping center that went up. And at the time, it was the largest shopping center under one roof in the world. And it was called Randhurst.
Oh, yeah, right, right.
And I just always wondered after I read this in your book if there was some connection there. So if you write about Sally Rand, you'll have to check out and see if Randhurst had anything to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, she's a fascinating character because she's really America's first sex symbol. And I mean, she was doing this dance, at a time when, America was pretty buttoned down. Now, the World's Fair had a definite vice side to it, the 33 Fair. You could get the equivalent of lap dances and things like that. And Sally Rand definitely was in that part of the fair where, I won't say it was seedy, but it had various things.
Genre. Yeah.
So, I mean, now the main part of the fair is kind of interesting. The 1893 fair had the Ferris wheel, right? And that was a big deal. We're like, oh, big deal, Ferris wheel. But that was incredible at that time. Well, what did the 33 fair have? It had the Sky Ride. What was the Sky Ride? Well, the Sky Ride was this cable car, 625 feet up, that went across the lagoon over to the fair and back. Now, you say, well, big deal. Well, in 1933, nobody's been in a plane.
It was a big deal.
Exactly, because nobody had flown. Nobody had seen Chicago from such a high vantage point. So, it's interesting. When I did the research, here's another interesting fact. Only 10% of the people had a car in 33.
Yes.
So, I mean, people still had horses. We assume, 33, America's very modern. It's just not true.
No.
And add to that, it's the Great Depression. Literally, people have no money.
Nothing.
A third of the banks have failed. A quarter of the people are unemployed.
So what was then? I mean, we had the World's Fair. What are we really showing off in the World's Fair?
Great question. Well, the World's Fair was a technology fair. It was a century of progress, okay? And here's another interesting point. It was the first corporate fair because they couldn't get any public funds. I mean, Chicago was literally bankrupt. Government didn't have any money. So corporations stepped in. Well, what did that mean? Well, they wanted to show off their wares. So what happened? Chrysler came in, created a whole assembly line where they would make a car in front of people from start to finish and then drive it off. And again, in 1933, you're talking about people who were born in the 19th century, a lot of these people. This was amazing to people. They just couldn't get over it. They had a canning factory set up there where people could press a button and watch cans of peas, go down an assembly line. People were just floored by this stuff. Okay, but it gets better. One of the big attractions of the 33 Fair is this. You can make a long-distance call. Okay, and you think, all right, so, well, in 1933, this wasn't a reality, okay? I mean, very few people could call across the country, but you could go into the fair, and they had it on a speaker, and you could call your aunt whatever in San Francisco and talk to her. And people were just amazed by this.
And boy, it was expensive, wasn't it?
Oh, God, yeah. And also, technology-wise, it was very tricky. You had to go through all these switchboards, all this other stuff. So it wasn't like you picked up your phone and said, I'm going to call Uncle Jeb down in, Florida. It just didn't happen. But, generally speaking, you were on a local switchboard, so you called around your local area. And here's what's really fascinating. At the 33 Fair, they had television. Very crude, but you could go into a room, and they had this enormous machine that was a camera, and it would shoot an image, very grainy, gray image of you into another room, into a screen. And people were like, oh, my God, like, this is the future. People don't even know what to think about this. But, again, it's technology. Also to neon. Neon we take for granted. This was a big new thing. And the fair did all these crazy things with neon that nobody had ever done before. The lights were incredible. They used more power than Madison, Wisconsin used. Okay, I mean, they basically built a city on the lakefront with plumbing, fire department, police department, you name it. They had all their own facilities. And again, they had to bring in all the water, all the electricity. And, again, they had this neon that people they would bend these tubes and everything and to emulate waterfalls and stuff. And people had never seen things like this. It's just, again, it's technology, the century of progress. Here's another interesting thought. The suburbs, right? I'm sure you have suburban sprawl where you live. I have it here
well,
in
I lived in a Chicago suburb, yeah.
Okay, you know of it, right? Okay, well, get this. Suburban sprawl, the homes they build are mostly very quickly put up prefabricated type of homes.
Ordered out of Sears catalog.
Right. This all started with the World's Fair. Why? Because they built on a man-made island where no building codes were there. So they could build any way they wanted. So they did really weird things. They used this stuff called sheetrock. Nobody had used it before. And they used plywood. Nobody had used it before, and because they had an adhesive. Here's another thing that's just amazing. There was no real color to anything then. If you were alive in 33, you would be in Chicago, and everything would be blacks and grays. And that's all it was, because they didn't have the technology for
earth tones.
For paint.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the World's Fair, they had this paint that they created where they could actually create all these different colors. They called it the Rainbow City.
Wow. That was just too cool. That was, you just did an audio documentary.
That's right.
That's kind of cool. But now you talked about the Secret Six.
Okay. Yes.
Kind of expand on that.
All right. So these 6 guys, all right, they band together. Now, there's certain things we take for granted for law enforcement now, but law enforcement then didn't do any of the things we do. What am I talking about? A witness protection program. Why did Capone rule Chicago? And I mean, he ruled it like a third world country. The reason he ruled it was because everybody would testify against him and end up dead. Okay? So nobody would. All right. But what did the Secret Six do? They got people who would testify against them, and you know what they did with them? They put them on steamers and sent them down to South America to wait. All right, what is that? That's a witness protection program. It was the first in the country. Nobody had done anything like that before. So now they could then they would bring the witness in to testify, and then they'd send them back down to South America. Mm-hmm. So for the first time, people could testify against the mob. What else did they do? They created a speakeasy that was theirs, and it was just a place where they could gather information. Again, we take this for granted. We have informants, we have people that pose as drug dealers and stuff like that now. But nobody had done things like that. Okay, the police weren't doing these things, but the Secret Six did. They also created their own gangsters, guys that were, would get into Capone's mob and get close to him and get information. Again, this is very innovative. They had like 40 detectives working for them, and they didn't only get Capone. Now let's talk about how they got Capone. It's kind of interesting. Capone, they could not get on murder. They couldn't get him for any of the big stuff. And at this time, believe it or not, Denise, most people didn't pay their income taxes. Income tax was sort of almost a voluntary thing. It was this sort of loosey-goosey system that they couldn't really enforce, so a lot of people just didn't pay. Well, Capone didn't pay either, but it was a law in the books. So what they did was, they were like, this guy makes money. They had a really hard time, but they finally found an accountant of his, again, sent him down to South America, and they found a ledger that showed him getting money. So they basically proved that he received like about $250,000 and never paid on it. So, again, this murderer, this is how they get him. And they try and plea bargain it down, and the judge at the last minute doesn't accept the plea bargain. Capone goes away for 11 years for tax evasion, which is basically he's gone. I mean, they sent him off to Alcatraz. He also has syphilis, which in the final stages you start to go crazy. So that was starting to take hold as well. But again, tax evasion. Now, here's a really interesting connection. O.J. Simpson, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they couldn't get O.J. Simpson for murdering his wife, right?
Right.
Okay. And that guy. Okay. What did they get him on? They got him on, basically holding up some guys for some football cards.
Right. Okay. Memorabilia, yeah.
They call that the Capone prosecution. And why do they call it that? Well, because what you do is you go, I can't get you for what you really did.
So we'll try something else.
Yeah, I'm going to get you for something else. But I'm really punishing you for what you really did. And that's why that woman threw Simpson in jail for so long, that judge, because she was really throwing him in jail for murdering his wife. So it's interesting because they call that the Capone prosecution.
Fascinating.
It is. I mean, and again, the Secret Six, nobody really knew who these guys were. Mm-hmm. I mean, this thing was, they had ideas. They thought it was the president of Sears and other guys, and a guy named Insull who ran the utilities. They had ideas, but these guys really did stay in the background. And Capone even said, the Secret Six are what finally got me. And he knew it because he couldn't buy them off.
So, but he didn't know it at the time. He didn't know it until after he was prosecuted, correct, about the Secret Six?
He had an idea. He had an idea, and he actually met with a guy named McCormick who ran Chicago Tribune. Mm-hmm. They met, and he said, look, what'll it take to get... Yeah,
McCormick's got some big real estate there, too, the McCormick Plaza.
Exactly. But they couldn't be bought. So, in a sense, they were the untouchables, but that whole untouchable story, again, is total bull. That's just...
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, Elliot Ness was, in fact, a real person, but, there was some poetic license.
He was an agent. Yeah. He did do the things that he said, but they didn't bring Capone down.
Pooh. That's a buzzkill.
I know. I love the movie too.
But where were the police all this time?
They were there. They were bought off. They were paid off.
So
everybody. Here's the thing: during Prohibition, everybody drank.
Everybody
was in a speakeasy. People made bathtub beer all the time. I was out with a guy last night who told me his grandfather used to make bathtub beer, and he said everybody did it. So it was like everybody drank. So everybody was breaking the law. Everybody was getting paid off. Capone during the Great Depression and before that was making $1 million a week, so he could buy anybody.
Oh man! So the whole paradigm of continuing to pay off law enforcement even still goes on today, where the media is I would argue even part of that too, because they pay off people to get access and law enforcement to give them inside track information and all the other kind of stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
When you approached this book, William, what was in your research, what was the one thing that you discovered that you just didn't think you would discover and it was a mind blow?
I think probably the Capone factor. And the fact that they built this thing during the Great Depression and they had no money at all, and the fact that 6 men banded together to catch this guy that nobody knew about, that was a mind blow to me. Because I too believe, yeah.
So what witness protection, really, the genesis was a private witness protection situation that ended up becoming a real thing, correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So they didn't have government
witness
like
that, and they started it. The Secret Six started it, and again, that's why I call it Al Capone and 1933 World's Fair, because they're forever connected.
What made you? Where did this whole story? What made you do this to start with?
I love Devil in the White City. I love Devil in the White City, Eric Larson, and then I went to this, and I was like, this is a great story. This is the second fair. So if your listeners out there love Devil in the White City, or then they're going to love Al Capone and the 33 Fair, because it's a very similar story of overcoming adversity, having this fair when nobody thought they could, getting rid of Capone when nobody thought they could, taking back control of the city when nobody thought they could. And it's just a fascinating story, of people and time during very dark times. But again, the fair was sort of a beacon of light, and Chicago pulled it off.
But it didn't really last, did it?
Nope, the fair was torn down. In fact, the fair, there was a riot at the end where everybody sort of stole different things. There was a fire. That's how the World's Fair finally ended in '34, and it was all over. And then the era of fairs pretty much ended, with the internet and people being able to travel. And you could go anywhere you wanted.
Well, you have brought some remarkable. I see a documentary really in this because if for nothing else about the Secret Six, and then what happened with the World's Fair and where time kind of went by us, and it's all in the history. So I think you've just done a remarkable job with this. And now it's kind of like back to business as usual. I would say, we've got corrupt mayors, and we had corrupt mayors in Chicago at the time, and we got corrupt mayors still in Chicago and still in, some major cities. So there's a lot coming out of your book here that I think you have kind of created a launch pad for people to go, oh, wow, I didn't know about this and didn't know about that, which they will continue to the reader would continue to go look. But then again, what you've uncovered takes you to probably another half a dozen books, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think people will like Al Capone and 33 World's Fair. It's a very entertaining read.
Congratulations, William, and thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience and with this book, because it's a wonder. And if for nothing else, the takeaway could be the whole Al Capone prosecution. So thank you, and come back again when you got another one coming off the presses.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks. Stay with us though after the commercial break. There's more coming your way.
Donald Trump came to Washington vowing to drain the swamp and make government work for the American people. But the swamp creatures in D.C. aren't going down without a fight, and the deep state is determined to overturn the election and keep their gravy train rolling. In these turbulent times, it's critical for patriots to stay engaged and be prepared to defend this president. You can stay up to date on Trump's battle to make America great again by listening to America First Radio with Jim Dawes each weeknight at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Liberty Feed.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
Hi, it's Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. You know, for nearly a decade, I've been educating, informing, and entertaining responsibly armed Americans. And during that time together, we've shared some ups and downs, haven't we? Trump's election saved our Supreme Court and no doubt the future of our gun rights for now. But now is not the time to lay down. The enemies of freedom are well-funded and more determined than ever. To keep up with the state of your gun rights, make sure to tune in to Armed American Radio right here on Talk America Radio, the new dominant voice in conservative talk radio.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us. KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1 Adel, Valdosta, Georgia. And WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to change some gears here. We're going to travel on down to Cuba and see what's happening down there. When I have to get some experts when we talk about Latin America and Cuba, I tap Luis Fleischman on the shoulder, and he's so good about coming on and talking to us. But he's with the Menengues Hemisphere over at the Center for Security Policy, and he's very, very dedicated to the whole I guess Latin American policy between the United States and all countries south of us. So, Luis, thanks for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience.
A pleasure to be here, Denise, and like always, it is a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm glad when you call me to speak at your program.
Thank you. We've got some interesting things that are happening here with Cuba, and because we've got all these other kind of weird disasters that are happening and whatnot, we're not paying, I would say, enough attention to what is happening in Cuba. And the one thing that's particularly interesting, Luis, is this sonic/acoustic attack weapons that began in August, which was still the Obama administration. And we're hearing that the Cubans are cooperating with the United States on this investigation, such that I think, over almost 2 dozen, if not 2 dozen, Americans have been affected, and I would say stoutly affected by whatever this weapon was and or is, because I hear that it's still going on. And then there was some Canadians that were affected as well. So, Luis, it's also not just our diplomats that were being housed in Cuban housing, working out of the embassy in Havana, but it was also some CIA operatives working undercover there. Now, in your chatters and in your travel, are you hearing more about what this was really all about, other than what, say, Associated Press is telling us about these attacks, or what they call incidences?
Well, no, not really. I think it is. I think that information is the same you get, which is through public media. Whether somebody actually else has more information, I don't know. But I think the most important thing about these attacks, these acoustic attacks, is that shows how aggressive the Cuban state is, and how distrustful is of the United States and also of U.S. influence. I believe that the Cubans are turning extremely paranoid, because the people who have suffered from these acoustic attacks are not only diplomats and people, people that have an official position with the U.S. government, but also people who actually went to travel. Just American tourists in Cuba have been the victims of this kind of acoustic attacks.
Yes.
And that means that the Cubans are basically suspecting everyone that comes with an American passport, and they are very suspicious and very paranoid about subversive activities, or maybe contacts with the opposition, with the Cuban dissidents, these kind of things. In other words, that is the paranoia, and that shows how the Cubans are very concerned about their regime and how much are they eager to preserve it.
Luis, is there some kind of Russian component that could be involved in this too? Because I'm not going to give the Russians a pass on any of this.
Well, let's put it that way. The relations between Cuba and Russia are old. And if we thought, let's say 25 years ago, when Gorbachev actually stepped out and basically stopped buying the sugar from the Cubans and being the main, let's say, the breadwinner or the bread giver for the Cubans, we have under Putin, although we don't have communism, but we have a new relation with Cuba that is not necessarily a relation of communist affinity or ideological affinity, but it is a relation where basically Putin is trying to recover, let's say, the Soviet power, the power that Russia lost after the Cold War. And at this point, Cuba is an ally. Cuba is an ally because it's an enemy of the United States, even though relations have been, let's say, are involving now diplomatic relations. The relations are not normal because the U.S. and Cuba Cuba particularly is not treating the U.S. as a friend, but Cuba is treating the U.S. clearly as an enemy. We are hearing, the positions of Miguel Díaz-Canel, who is the likely successor of Castro after 2018, and you see a very, very strong anti-U.S. discourse. So how normalization can take place, I don't know. Cuba also supports the government of Venezuela, which is a government that the United States opposes to, and so many other countries in the region. So Cuba continues to be what is called in rhetoric an enemy of the United States, and continues to be the same pariah state that it has always been. So therefore, Russia is taking advantage of all that in order to gain a strategic advantage in Latin America. And they will do it also with Venezuela. They are coming to the rescue of Venezuela as well, even though the regime is basically in very bad shape. The Russians are coming to do the rescue, and they have been the main providers of weapons. The Russian presence is also more active in Ecuador and in Bolivia and in Nicaragua, other countries that actually have sided with the Venezuelan government and have also been, in their ideology, they are anti-American. So yes, the presence of Russia in Cuba is crucial and definitely is going to have an impact.
Well, I'm a little concerned because, we had we can't even begin to imagine what Obama and John Kerry had proposed to Raul Castro to normalize these relations and begin to have some kind of travel and trade and blah, blah, blah with Cuba. Now, Raul's going away. So we have this Miguel character who I would argue has been very patient. He's kind of towed the line and kind of come up through the ranks. And I think he is just as bad, if not worse, than the Castro brothers, because he hasn't given any indication that he wants to pursue the normalized relations, whatever that definition is, with the United States. In other words, I think that maybe he has taken a look at what moves Trump has made or decisions that he has made, and he's going to say, okay, I'm going to dig in my heels too. So I would imagine here in the next 20 months or so that whatever we got going on with Cuba is gonna implode. Is that an overstatement, Luis?
Well, with regard to the new, to the successor, Miguel Díaz-Canel, that you just mentioned, he is often portrayed as a moderate politician. And but on the other hand, most recently he came out with very strong statements, invoking the figure of Che Guevara, talking against Cuban dissidents, talking about independent media, talking about the fact that European countries and the United States are supporting subversion. In other words, at this point, it is not clear whether all this talk is in order to basically assure or secure his position after Castro is gone, or that's who he is. Now, he, on the other hand, can be another Gorbachev. That's a possibility. I'm not ruling that out. Namely, somebody that, being young, the guy was born in 1960, was born with the revolution, is now almost 60 years old, I would say 58 years old, 57 years old. In other words, he understands the hardships of Cuba, and maybe he will make a shift. That's a possibility, but I wouldn't count on that. I think there is a strong security apparatus and the military that has been benefiting tremendously from the regime. The entire state bureaucracy actually has benefited from the regime. And I do not know to what extent, if he appears as too moderate, to what extent he will get enough support. Maybe yes, maybe not. And the other thing is that as long as Raul Castro is alive, because remember, Raul Castro claimed that he will leave in 2018. But after 2018, he will continue to be alive unless he dies, obviously,
Exactly.
And as long as a dictator like that is alive, changes are very unlikely. Remember, even when these dictators are very sick and unable to function, there is no change until they die, because they have generated such fear that even when they are sick and when they are crippled, let's say, they still have tremendous power. And we have seen that with Stalin, who was sick before he died, and with Francisco Franco. It was not until they died that there was kind of a revision of the regime or their policies. So I don't see a solution in the short term, not at all.
I don't either. And I would say that there's some kind of a doctrine that has probably come out of Moscow that has been provided to Maduro in Venezuela, because he just recently visited Moscow. And and I would say that that same doctrine has been shared with the Castros / Miguel's Canal, that this is where you need to go. We could be patient. But this is how we're going to set the table, and these are the activities we're going to use. And I think that is really what is happening here. It's kind of like they're firing a few shots across the bow of the United States just to kind of get a reaction, but they're going to stick to it. I mean, we have to trust what they're doing, especially when we sent home some Cuban diplomats. We just said, okay, we're pulling some of ours out and we're dismissing some of yours. We're expelling some of yours. And, that raised some red flags when that happened because of these acoustic sonic attacks, whatever they may be. I believe that the State Department clearly knows more than what they're telling us for them to take the actions of dispelling or expelling some of those Cuban diplomats. Cuba has one of the bigger spy operations out there, and that's what I think a large part of their revenue is because they're spying on the United States and they're selling that intelligence. So,
absolutely.
The fact that we, under the Obama administration, that we eliminated the militant history of Cuba to normalize relations is still an outrage. And we've normalized relations. We go down there, we have a baseball game, we do all these fun things. And then in August, just before Obama leaves the White House, we come up with these, attacks, these incidences. So there's something more.
That shows how treacherous the regime is.
Yes. And so I don't think you can have a conversation about Cuba without having a conversation where Iran's relationship with them, Venezuela's relationship with them, and Nicaragua. And so who is always sitting in the background? And that's Moscow, right?
Well, among others, yes, definitely.
And China.
Definitely, and there is like a traditional influence there from Moscow. There is no question about it.
Well, so Trump has taken some aggressive, I would say quasi-aggressive actions on Venezuela, Maduro, and I'm good with that. But then those two also have consequences, Luis, and that is what is happening with, Colombia and some of the other, areas down there where these people are fleeing because, the country's in a full-blown tailspin. And we haven't heard one word really out of the Castro regime about what is happening in Venezuela, have we?
No, not at all, because they support that regime.
Interesting,
isn't it? Very simple. They are supporting Maduro. There are 30,000 security troops in Cuba. In Venezuela, and with the support of Castro. And so therefore, there is no reason for them to say anything except in defense of Venezuela. And this is what they have done. The Venezuelan regime, I mean.
Well, isn't it? And so we have this wonderful relationship now with Havana. Isn't it? Are we asking? Have you heard that our State Department is even asking any questions of the Castro regime?
Not the State Department, neither Obama did, and obviously no. That has not happened, and I believe that even now, even if Trump actually requested that, probably it would be ignored, and. Obama knew that was like that was like a hot potato and not an issue that they wanted to discuss. But it's an important issue. It affects our security and definitely something that needs to be raised. And I've been saying that in my multiple articles.
It's very, very curious how quiet our State Department has been when it comes to Cuba, Latin America, meaning Nicaragua, Venezuela, Honduras, El Salvador. I mean, there's almost been nothing there, such that we haven't even challenged the regime in Havana. Like, are you cool with what's going on in Venezuela? Because I mean, I haven't heard the Castro brothers say anything about it.
No, obviously not. They only supported the regime.
Yeah. It's going to blow up in our faces. I mean, if we terminate any kind of relationship, and it looks like we're headed that way, terminating relationship with Cuba, can you predict any kind of fallout from that, any kind of consequence?
No, in my opinion, no. I think having a relationship with them or not having a relationship with them is basically the same, because we don't have any influence on the regime. And not under normal diplomatic relations, and certainly not when we don't have them. I would say that even with Iran, the situation is different, because Iran is even more sensitive, let's say, to the possibility of imposing sanctions. With Cuba, that doesn't make a difference. They have lived with that for a long time, and they don't mind continue to live like that. I mean, the Iranians, I think, care more about it. So I believe there is no difference between one thing and the other, between having or not having a relationship.
What's the general feeling of the Cubans in South Florida at this point? Are they?
Well, I think there was a substantial number of people that actually supported the normalization process at one point. But I think what I'm hearing today, and by the way, I don't have any scientific basis except the fact that I talked to many Cubans, and is that they have been pretty disappointed by the fact that there has not been progress with the political prisoners, but the fact that Cuba continues to support the Venezuelan regime, but the fact that nothing is really moving that there is no reciprocity in that relation. So I think a lot of Cubans are coming back to the old conception, saying, well, now we gave them an opportunity, and basically we now see the true colors of the regime.
Yeah, they failed.
That's what I'm hearing more and more. I think the enthusiasm that the normalization initiative taken by Obama actually had almost 3 years ago now, is not the same enthusiasm even among those who supported that move.
Well, the relationship with Cuba is going to go one of two directions, and I don't see it getting any better. And certainly with these sonic acoustic attacks, I don't know that the mystery is going to be solved. I mean, we send an awful lot of FBI people down there. We've got CIA working there undercover, and it can only go south as far as I'm concerned. And it's
I would say that yes, as you know, but two things need to happen. One is the death of Raúl, and secondly, a change in whoever takes over the reins of government, whether it's Díaz-Canel or whoever takes the reins of government. Mm-hmm. That's the only conditions. But while Castro is alive, nothing is going to change, whether he is in power or he isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we have clearly an Iranian influence. We have a Middle Eastern influence that happens in Cuba, and then we obviously have a Russian influence. All of those are adversarial to the United States. Our State Department, I don't think, has done a good enough job to begin to sell what the United States is really all about. I think we've done a lousy public relations effort when it comes to Latin America.
Absolutely, and now we don't even have enough appointments by the administration in the State Department that deal with Latin America. I mean, we don't have enough appointments almost on anything in the State Department. And that's another problem, which I believe we discussed last time. I mean, if they don't appoint people and professionals, because I understand that there is a mood where President Trump believes that the experts actually don't count, that the experts have made only mistakes. Well, The experts may have made mistakes. I'm not saying that they haven't.
Sure.
But on the other hand, they are the ones that know the situation, and they are the ones that also did a lot of good, not just mistakes. So if President Trump continues to delay these appointments only because this and that person criticize him, I think basically they are emptying. We don't have a structure for a good foreign policy, and the people that are going to remain as the most influential are precisely those bureaucrats in the State Department that have conducted themselves in the same way all along. And that's the problem. For instance, why Thomas Shannon today is such an influential figure, let's say, I'm talking about Latin America in particular, and partly because there have not been serious appointments of people that could have, let's say, a good conservative foreign policy, or at least a foreign policy that is directed in coordination with the White House. So, in any event, I mean, I think there is a need for a fundamental change in the conception of the White House at this point, and I think what we need is to provide some sort of independence to whoever, not only to the Secretary of State, but also to the people who actually work under the Secretary of State, to do the things. And I'm not talking about to conduct foreign policy, and I'm not talking about the bureaucrats of always. You know, the bureaucrats that always actually populated the State Department. I'm talking about, you know, people that are loyal to certain philosophy and know how to conduct these foreign policies. It's not happening today. It's an administration that is lacking teeth.
Well, and I think you and I can agree that when it comes to a propaganda war, not only are we not losing it, we're not even in it. And we're not doing the public relations marketing we need to be doing globally. You know, I think that we were misunderstood. We were misunderstood under the Obama administration, and today I would say that we're probably more misunderstood than we ever were, because nobody knows necessarily what to think here at this point when it comes to foreign leaders and whatnot. But
no, absolutely, we need to create, and I think there are certain things that the Trump administration is doing that are really good. Like, for instance, to show that we are not Obama, we are not kind of this weak nation that we have been perceived to be under the Obama administration. But on the other hand, there is no clear direction in terms of how to implement it, you know. So the president actually maintains us in some sort of suspense. And, you know, we need to basically organize these attitudes. I think in general the instincts of President Trump are good in terms of showing our strength. But then we need a sophisticated foreign policy, and we don't have it. You know, either because the Secretary of State is undermined, or because we don't have enough professionals, or people who are experts. Even from I'm talking about people from the think tanks, or people that actually have the expertise to be able to carry out a conservative policy. So that is what basically is undermining our policy.
Thank you, Luis. Thanks for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience, and come back again soon, because, I mean, it's always a very enlightening exchange that we get to have with you, so we appreciate it.
Every time you call me, I will be there for you.
All right, good deal. Thank you. Thank you. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
The truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 Tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4-7 Tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEBT, gas TOT 5-3.
ladies and gentlemen, thanks for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy that you could stay along for the wild ride, because we do cover things from the sublime to the ridiculous. And I've got a previous guest with us who I've come to honor his work, mostly because he's been in the belly of the beast and he's out of government, but he's still fighting the good fight on our behalf. And that is certainly when it comes to national security and the safety of the American people. And that's Philip Haney. Now, I'm sure you guys remember Philip, because he was the Department of Homeland Security whistleblower. And he has written a book. And if you haven't been able to read it, please do. It is, if you see something, say nothing. Because he had quite an experience doing what he was doing at the Department of Homeland Security. In fact, he's testified before Congress, I don't know, 3-4 dozen times at least. So, Philip, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Yeah, it's an honor to be back. Nice to talk to you again.
You are the consummate investigator. You don't let anything go until you yourself are absolutely satisfied, and then you present it to everybody that not only will listen but has to listen. And even those that don't want to listen, you're kind of in their face going, "Hey, this is unresolved." And I really like it because you just never give up. And you've got a lot of years at this, Philip. Is this fire in this belly going to go on until you just can't handle it any longer?
Yeah, until I'm too old and feeble to move. I haven't been released from it. I mean, I don't have the luxury of walking away from it because it's still an ongoing story. I can't just turn and walk away from it. And I'm bound and determined to do all that I can to find somebody in Congress, because that's my current chain of command. I don't have a federal law enforcement agency as a chain of command. I have Congress now. So even this week, I'm going to be going back to D.C. again for another round of briefings with members of Congress to see if I can share with them the information that I've received in the last year and a half related to the group of individuals that were connected to the San Bernardino shootings. It's still going on. So no, I intend to continue with it until we see this thing through, whatever that takes. So I'm in it for the duration.
Good. Thank you. And I'm going to tap you on the shoulder from time to time and kind of get a situation report from you. But, Philip, I was just kind of looking, at a couple of these people that have been involved in activities, certainly like the San Bernardino shooting. And even in the Imam Awan IT guys in Congress, we seem to have a common denominator here, and that's Pakistan. And we have these crazy relationships with visas and cultural exchange programs and all this other kind of nutty stuff that we do with Pakistan. And, some of these weird people end up here in the United States, and they're either directed or they gravitate to some of these mosques where I would say they're infused with more militancy. Did I get some of that right?
You got it all right. And
yay!
That's been my operating premise for some time now, is that these people are not our friends, even though we call them allies. For example, let's just start with the most basic observation that Pakistan is a mortal enemy of India, which is supposed to also be our ally. So how do we become friends and allies of two countries that are mortal enemies of each other? And the reason why Pakistan is a mortal enemy of India is not over a political difference, it's over the intention of implementation of Sharia law to basically turn Pakistan into, India into a Sharia-compliant country. And this has been going on since really 1948 in the Gandhi movie, when they were partitioned into East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and India in the middle. It used to all be India. Now we have Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. Bangladesh and Pakistan are both Muslim majority countries.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, there's a new form of Al-Qaeda that's emerged. This is one of the things that I learned when I was in Israel just a couple of weeks ago. The new organization, which you can look up, is called Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent.
Right.
And the fragments of the original Al-Qaeda, which we think of associated with Osama bin Laden, was actually made up of 5 individuals, leaders, and 12 different affiliated organizations that formed a coalition called Al-Qaeda. Of course, that original structure doesn't really exist in that original format. Meanwhile, we have another organization that came up called ISIS, which is not merely 5 individuals and 12 organizations, but probably 50 individuals and about 35 to 45 different affiliated Muslim jihadi groups all over the world. Pieces of the original one and pieces of the second, meaning ISIS, have now coalesced into a third organization called Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent. And their coalition encompasses the entire area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, which we've been hearing a lot in the news lately because of the Rohingya people.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand that the Rohingyas are an ethnic group that are actually native to Bangladesh. And that what they're trying to do is what they try to do in so many other countries, is create an enclave, a Sharia-compliant state within a state, which then grows out and subverts the majority culture, in this case Burma or Myanmar, and implements Sharia law, which is always their goal. So you've got a new organization that's bigger than any of the previous 2 ever were. And it's going to be like a gravitational force, like a sun in the middle of a solar system, that's going to pull jihadi fighters from all over the world into the Indian subcontinent. So why is that important? What bearing does that have on what we do here in America? Well, the President and the State Department and the Department of Defense just announced a new Afghanistan policy, didn't they?
Yes.
And now we're going to be sending our military personnel, men and women, into a theater that has just become magnitudes more complex and magnitudes more dangerous. Because ISIS, what we know of as ISIS, has now merged with the Taliban.
Correct.
And they're working together. So now we have this magnification of forces of all these other disconnected, if at least it seemed like maybe to some, but have now coalesced into one macro organization that comprises what? A third? Maybe a quarter of the entire world population. That area of the world is densely populated and has become a new gravitational force in the global Islamic movement.
Philip, I would argue that the intelligence agencies predicted and gave a summary on what was happening in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Burma, because we can't forget that Obama in September of 2016 went to Myanmar out of the blue. So I think he
You're right.
was
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
He knew They were given the heads up, so it was kind of like, we got to go over there and check some things out and see how big this problem really is.
Mm-hmm. AQIS actually was formally inaugurated about mid-2014. So even though it's been launched for 3 years, plus or minus, it actually didn't really take shape until this summer, when they published a document, a 20-page briefing document called Code of Conduct, which again, they're so helpful. They posted it online in really clearly written English. In other words, it's designed for the English-speaking world to read, of exactly what their strategic goal is and what tactics they intend to use to accomplish the goal. And at the top of the list, and I mean literally, the target are Americans and Israelis. They have plainly stated their intention is to magnify and enlarge the arena that they're operating in and to go after, first and foremost, American and Israeli targets, and then to subvert the governments of those 5 major nations that we just talked about, which goes again back to the Rohingya. That's part of the AQIS global strategy. And again, you might, just for the sake of discussion, wonder, well, what does that have to do with us in America? Then that ties into the book that you mentioned at the beginning, See Something, Say Nothing. The group that I worked on that I got in so much trouble for was called Tablighi Jamaat.
Yes.
Tabligh. And guess where Tablighi Jamaat comes from?
Pakistan.
Pakistan and India, the Indian subcontinent. Yet, if you imagine your fingers on your hand, your index finger might be Lashkar-e-Taiba, the group that did the Mumbai massacre. The next finger might be Tablighi Jamaat. The next finger might be, which is the group I worked on, the Deobandis, which is another name for the same kind of Muslims. The fourth finger on the hand is a group we've all heard of, Taliban. The Taliban are Deobandi Muslims from the Indian subcontinent. When they go to madrasas when they're kids growing up, they learn the Deobandi ideology of Islam, and they go to the battlefield to implement the Sharia, the attempt to implement Sharia law in the country where they're fighting, which in this case is Afghanistan. But Tablighi Jamaat is operating here in the United States and all over the world. And so the U.S. government shut the case down in 2012, eliminated the information out of the system, and even that wasn't good enough. Then they came after me to find probable cause to indict me on criminal charges for violating the civil rights and civil liberties of these foreign nationals, these non-citizens coming from that part of the world, because they said that I was violating their rights and their privacy by implying that they were part of a terrorist group, meaning Tablighi Jamaat. And now here we have AQIS, Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent, merging into the global arena, and lo and behold, the Taliban and all the rest of these Deobandi groups are part of the coalition. So was I right when I was a law enforcement officer? Absolutely right.
Absolutely. Now, is Deobandi kind of a revisionist movement, Phil?
They're a revival movement. Okay. They are a Salafi movement.
Okay.
Salafi, by the way, you might know, but just in case, Salafi does not mean radical. We hear that word Salafi, and it's often the connotation is somehow that it means radical. It doesn't. It means original.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean by original? Original is to go back to the Sunnah, the pathway that Muhammad followed. In other words, they're going back to the form of Islam that Muhammad himself practiced. The orthodox, fundamental kind of Islam that existed when Muhammad was first here, which what? Included macro component of conquering by the sword in order to take new land and new territory. We're going back to the 7th century approach to Islam, which saw the beginning of one of the fastest and largest expansions in the history of the world. The Islamic Empire encompassed a greater area than the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, or the Babylonian Empire. It was bigger than all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they went within 100 years from Saudi Arabia across the North African continent, jumped the Straits of Gibraltar in the year 711, and were finally stopped by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in the year 721. It took them 100 years exactly, actually 90, to go all the way across the whole Mediterranean region and conquer nearly all of the territory in the modern Mediterranean basin. But that was only to the west. They also went to the east. And they went almost as far as China. And that's why the empire of the original Islamic world was bigger than any other historic empire. And now what they're trying to do is the caliphate. And that's why this caliphate movement is so important, because they know that at earlier times in history that they did it once before. And now they're believing that it's time to do it again. And that's what ISIS believes. That's what Boko Haram believes. That's what Hezbollah, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Tablighi Jamaat, Hamas, Rohingyas, the people in the Philippines, and the people operating here in the United States. They all believe the same basic thing: to extend the influence of Islam and the implementation of Sharia until all the world submits to the will of Allah. That's very, in a nutshell, what they're seeking to do. But what they argue about, sometimes violently amongst themselves, is the tactics, not the strategy, not the goal. That is the same. What they argue about is how they go about doing it. Muslim Brotherhood, for example, does what I call saturation. Water into a sponge, like a picture of a sponge floating on a pool of water. Up comes the water into the sponge from the bottom up. That's the Muslim Brotherhood's approach. Hamas or Lashkar-e-Taiba or Taliban, they're not satisfied with the pace of the saturation. They want it to go faster.
Yeah,
so they push on the sponge from above.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually work together. Pressure from above, saturation from underneath, and eventually, if nothing is done, the sponge becomes supersaturated.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Now, we know that members of Congress know some of this because you have imparted some of this to them. They also get their normal intelligence reports. We know that CENTCOM knows a lot of this. We know that the Pentagon knows a lot of this. And I would argue even the State Department knows it. But the State Department, to me, is the biggest culprit of them all, as is the United Nations. Such that the policy, the admittance of the issues and the conflict and the militancy is being so diluted that when it gets to the press, we don't understand the significance nor the size. Did I get that right?
It's like a tea bag. Yes, it's like a tea bag. You dip the tea bag in the water so many times, there's no tea flavor left in the tea bag anymore. It's all diluted out. If you want a good example, although it's not Pakistan per se, look at the Kurdish referendum for independence that they just had, what was it, last week? And the State Department came out immediately and said, we will not support it. We consider it to be an illegitimate political
and non-binding.
Mm-hmm. Non-binding. When these guys, the Kurdish, have been our best ally in the Middle East for the last 15 or 20 years. They love America. Yes, they are Muslim, but they're not the same kind of Muslims as the ones we're talking about like Taliban and Lashkar-e-Taiba, and so what we did is undermined the efforts of our one best true ally in the Middle East. By the way, Kurdish people are spread through Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Those borders didn't exist before 1917, after the end of the World War I. So for the last 100 years, the Kurdish people have been split into 4 artificial regions, artificial in terms of lines that were drawn. Mm-hmm. And what they want to do is simply be reconstituted as they were for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And yet we say, no, it's not binding and we don't recognize it.
We're succumbing
to
Iran.
So what is behind
that?
Mm-hmm. What's behind it? I'm agreeing with you in your premise, and I think I can tell you the variable. The variable is that Israel supports the Kurdish movement. So if our so-called allies in the region, Turkey, Iran, and whoever else is involved here in this complex situation, hate Israel, therefore they're going to pressure or coerce or influence our foreign policy so that for the sake of some supposed long-term beneficial goal that we have over there, we will refuse to recognize the Kurdish effort because those darn Israelis are involved. And we can't authorize or acknowledge their influence in the Middle East. So we won't recognize the Kurds either, because we certainly don't want to offend our great neighbors and allies in that part of the world by acknowledging by default Israel's presence in that part of the world.
Isn't it just so convoluted that even to try and take piece parts of this, Philip, and solve the problem, it can't really be done, can it? It's festered for so long.
It's like trying to take a machine apart while it's still running.
Yes.
Yeah,
Good
it's
analogy.
really difficult to do that. Mm-hmm. But if we really do stand up for democratic principles and the unalienable rights that our Creator endowed us with, and we're trying to set an example for other ethnic groups and countries around the world to follow, then why do we constantly contradict our own values and make concessions and agreements with countries that are our stated enemy? And yet somehow, by appeasing them, we seem to believe, we're talking about the State Department now, remember, that that's going to turn out okay. So what do you think the chances are, as according to the new Afghanistan policy, that the Taliban are going to literally come and sit down at the negotiating table with the Americans and find a way to have peace in Afghanistan? Do you really think
less than
that
zero
they're going to violate their own code of honor?
They've already said they're not going to.
No. Plus their newfound coalition with these different jihad groups that are coming in from all over the world. You don't really think they're going to dishonor themselves in front of their own allies and brothers, do you? And come and sit down at the negotiating table?
Not a chance.
So if that's our platform, then what's the chance of it really actually succeeding?
Zero. Ladies and gentlemen.
Take the emotion out of it, right?
That's exactly right. We've been speaking with Philip Haney, ladies and gentlemen. His book is See Something, Say Nothing, and a man that's always in the fight. Philip, we could talk to you for 2 or 3 more hours, but I don't know if you could tell. You can hear some road noise because the man's on a mission. He's in his vehicle. And thank you for being with us here, Philip, and come back.
I'd love to, and I thank you, everyone, for listening. I really do appreciate it. It's important.
Yes, sir, it is. There's more coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, so stay with us.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia.
And Don Newen from Cowboy Logic Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't go to sleep every night completely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place,
Then you're simply not doing enough. Join us every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for Cowboy Logic Radio.
let the restoration begin.
Hi, this is Denise Simon, the host of the Denise Simon Experience. I feel compelled to tell you people that Don Newen is my favorite talk radio host, period. Not Mark Levin, not Rush Limbaugh. I can't do this.
Do it, Denise. Read it. Read it, Denise.
Not Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham, but yep, Don Newen. Cowboy Logic Radio is featuring the ever-stellar, highly gifted Don Newen, right here on Talk America Radio.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio. On behalf of my beautiful co-host, Donna Fiducia, I'd like to express my gratitude to Denise Simon for those kind words. I don't think I could have done it better if I would have written that myself. Cowboy Logic Radio, every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Talk America Radio. This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to kind of discuss here a topic that is actually getting some good press, and that is Iran in the nuclear deal, whether it's going to be recertified or not so certified. And somebody I haven't actually spoken to in a long time. I reach out to her every once in a while, but it's been a long while, and that's Clare Lopez, who's a former CIA officer and a vice president for research and analysis at the Centers for Security Policy. And if anybody has got any stick-to-itiveness when it comes to policing everything that has to do with Iran and the nuclear program, it's Clare. And Clare, you have been making the rounds. I've heard people say that they've seen you on this panel. You've done a remarkable job. That you've been made an appearance over here. You've done a remarkable job. So I would agree with that. You do your homework, and you do a fabulous presentation such that people can really understand what they need to understand. So thank you for all the good work you do.
Well, and thank you very much. I'm always glad to be back on with you, and look forward to talking with you.
One thing that's kind of interesting, I'll start off before we get into the nuclear side, and that is listing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terror organization. And I don't know that we've actually pulled that trigger yet. You may know more certainly than I, but Iran has already put out some threats against the United States if, in fact, we do that, which is kind of a mind blow that we haven't already done it. We've had decades of reasons to declare them a terror organization, but they want to target our military bases. And then they tell us, hey, the IRGC does great stuff because they're fighting Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. Clare,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
That's a whining way of saying, what the heck?
So, let's get this straight, right? If we don't allow Iran to go nuclear with this deal, it's going to attack us. Then it seems to me it's much to our advantage to get this over with now before they actually deploy their nuclear weapons rather than after.
Yes. There's so much. I guess the thing I'm most angry about with the Obama administration, when it comes to North Korea, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Cuba, when it comes to the FARC in Venezuela, and when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Syria, they literally dismissed all of the exported terror in history of these countries and these leaders. And in the case of Iran, it's especially glaring because we did this, I don't even know what, JPOA. It's an agreement that I don't think anybody signed. And then we gave him hundreds of millions of dollars on top of that. I think that makes me the angriest of all, that the Obama administration was so dismissive that these leaders, these countries didn't pay any consequence, right?
Exactly. And to get back to your question before about the IRGC being listed as a terrorist organization, you're absolutely right that there is, there are decades worth of evidence that they belong very much so on that list, beginning, of course, with the revolution in Iran itself by the Ayatollah Khomeini and his cohorts in 1979, the seizure of our embassy that year. Only a few years later, in 1983, the attack on our Marine Corps base in Beirut, as well as our embassy, not to mention attacks on the French that same year, too. Those attacks, of course, carried out by Hezbollah, and then carry it right forward to the alliance that the IRGC made, that Iran made, with Al-Qaeda in about 1990 and the early 1990s going forward. And we know this from the 9/11 Commission report, that the regime of Umar al-Bashir, which is a criminal regime, he, the president, still the president to this day, wanted by the International Court at The Hague for war crimes, genocide essentially of Sudanese people, in particular in Darfur, but other places too. He invited jihadis of the world to come to Khartoum in that year of 1990. The Iranians came too, so did Hezbollah, and that's where the deal was struck between the Iranians, well, I should say maybe among the Iranians, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda. And from that point onwards, you had a terror alliance that resulted in 1996 in the Khobar Towers bombing, our Air Force base in Saudi Arabia. 1998, the attackers at the East Africa embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam were trained by Hezbollah, because the deal essentially struck in Khartoum was for Hezbollah, which had figured out how to do big building suicide bombings with trucks, which is what happened to our Marine Corps base in 1983 and the embassy as well. The deal was for them, Hezbollah, to train Al-Qaeda how to do those big building bombings with suicide truck bombers. That happened in 1998 in Dar es Salaam and Nairobi. Then go to the USS Cole in the year 2000, which wasn't with a vehicle per se, but a boat in the harbor, but the same idea against the USS Cole. And then finally, of course, 9/11. And this was a collaboration among Iran, Saudi Arabia, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda. This is a documented fact. Nobody wants to face up to it. But as you said, there is a long, decades-long history of terrorist activity by the IRGC. Never mind all of the provision by the IRGC. We should say that stands for Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's the acronym for that there. The provision by the IRGC of explosives and explosive devices, including IEDs and VBIEDs, car bombs, in Iraq against our troops and coalition troops in the 2000s. So for all of these reasons, yes, the IRGC should be designated a terror organization. It meets all of the legal qualifications to be on that list.
One that I'd like to throw in there was the AMIA bombing in Argentina.
Yes.
Which, interestingly enough, is a case that is still, after all this time, because somebody murdered the prosecutor 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
That's
and documents are still coming out. There's actually been some kind of a quasi documentary that was actually made on this thing too. So, yet that is another one. But
yeah, so this brings it to our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere.
Yes.
And once again, yes, we have Hezbollah acting on orders from Tehran. Hezbollah, by the way, does not just do willy-nilly. It doesn't go off on its own and engage in rogue operations on the big stuff. It takes orders directly from Tehran. The chain of military command goes from the Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah, of Hezbollah, on up through the IRGC, maybe the Quds Force, that is a branch of the IRGC, and to Tehran, to the Supreme Leader himself, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And so it was on two occasions, actually, in Buenos Aires, 1992, the first attack against the Israeli embassy took place in Buenos Aires by Hezbollah on orders of Iran. And then 1994, against this Jewish cultural center, again in Buenos Aires, again by Hezbollah, again on orders of the Iranian leadership. So this Argentinian, incredibly brave prosecutor named Alberto Nisman began to investigate the second of these, the 1994 Cultural Center bombing, the AMIA, as the abbreviation is for that center. And it took him a long time, and he finally came out with I think it was over 500-page, in Spanish anyway, indictment in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm recalling right. And it was so large because it was not just about the Cultural Center bombing. That was the heart of it, but the investigation he put together was far wider ranging and had to do with the activities of Iran through its embassy in Buenos Aires, giving orders, managing the operations, the terror operations of Hezbollah in South America, operating Hezbollah out of the tri-border area. That's a place where Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina come together in a kind of a lawless, ungoverned space. And that is where Hezbollah first got its foothold in the Southern Hemisphere. In the Western Hemisphere in South America, and out of which it staged those two attacks, 92 and 94 in Buenos Aires. Well, Nisman was scheduled to provide testimony to the Argentinian parliament in January of 2015, right? Or 2016?
2015.
2015.
Yeah. The documents came out in 2016.
He was assassinated in his own apartment the night before the testimony, which means that the government of Argentina, headed by Cristina de Kirchner, who inherited that post essentially from her husband, and her foreign minister, I think his name is Hector Timmerman. I'm remembering all of this if I can do it right.
You're right. Good job.
And so they would have been implicated very deeply in Alberto Nisman's testimony. Well, so he was assassinated, but the information that he had put together, the case he put together, implicating not just the Argentinian leadership government, but Iran and Hezbollah, did get out, is my understanding, out of the country and into other safe hands before he was assassinated, of course, fearing such a thing, I suppose. And as you said, things have been dribbling out ever since. But the important thing for us, even more than these horrific terror attacks that took so many lives and injured so many more, is that Iran and Hezbollah operate more or less unimpeded in the Western Hemisphere, and that means all the way up South America, through Central America, and on up into Mexico, where Hezbollah teams up with the Mexican drug cartels and runs operations straight up across our, at least up until now, undefended southern border, unsecured southern border, and all the way on up into Canada. Those operations include narco-trafficking and all kinds of other things like money laundering and contraband running and different kinds of fraud and scams that they run to support themselves. So all of that comes together in the indictment, really, against Iran and Hezbollah.
And for the Obama, John Kerry, and Hillary Clinton team to dismiss all of that is, I think that into itself is probably a criminal action that I don't even begin to know how to define.
Well, it's at a very minimum dereliction of duty and failure to uphold oaths of office to the Constitution that they all took. But coming to the nuclear deal, which is where we were headed, I think here is that President Trump is facing a deadline on Sunday, that is October 15, on whether or not to recertify this nuclear abomination of a deal that Obama struck with the Iranian leadership, other P5+1, that is the permanent United Nations member, Security Council members of the United Nations, and the +1 is Germany, plus the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. That deal concluded in July of 2015. It's called the JCPOA, short for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the nuclear deal with Iran. So because of an act of Congress, the president must recertify every 90 days that Iran is in compliance with that deal. Now, President Trump acceded and did recertify in both April and July of this year, 2017. Now comes the third recertification deadline in a few days. And all indications are that he will not recertify. Now, there are many reasons why he should not, but that alone does not withdraw the United States from this abomination of a deal. There are, just as you said, exactly right, Denise, no signatures on any page of the thing by any party to the thing, but the United States would have to take an additional step, either through Congress by reimposing sanctions, which would be deemed by Iran to violate or to break the agreement, or a statement by the president, a unilateral statement that the United States will withdraw from it. So basically, this deadline coming up in a few days about certification is just the first step.
Well, as a primer here, Claire, define for the listeners a PMD, a possible military dimension.
Right. So we know from the historical record that the Ayatollah Khomeini, in the depths of the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, around 1988, that would be about a year before Khomeini died, turned to his IRGC and said, "We got to get the bomb. Get the bomb." The IRGC went to Pakistan. They went to the so-called father of the Pakistani bomb, A.Q. Khan, and bought blueprints and parts, centrifuges, and what have you. And that launched the Iranian nuclear weapons program. It continued, if you can believe this, for the next 14 years in secrecy. Now, I don't know what various intelligence services might have found out or known about it during that time, but from 1988 until August of 2002, the program, the secret clandestine Iranian nuclear weapons program, was not known publicly nor to the IAEA. But then in that month of August in 2002, the Iranian Democratic Opposition Group in exile, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, held two, I guess, pretty much simultaneous press conferences, one in Paris, their headquarters at that time, and one in Washington, D.C., where they basically blew the lid off the Iranian nuclear weapons program. They revealed various sites whose names have now become fairly familiar to us. Natanz, the enrichment site; Isfahan, the conversion site; places like Iraq, the plutonium light heavy water reactor, and other sites from that point onwards were revealed too, Lavizan, Shia, and Fordo. Suffice to say that every single facility in the Iranian nuclear weapons program that we now know publicly, every site was revealed by someone else, either the Iranian opposition, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, or in some other way, intelligence services, satellite imagery. The Iranians are and remain to this day a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which obligates them, under the terms of that treaty, to reveal to the IAEA every facility in their nuclear program and to open those facilities for inspection. Well, they didn't do that for 14 years, and they still haven't. So now comes along, let's jump ahead to the Obama administration taking office in 2009, I believe, taking office with an agenda to basically turn the Middle East over to the Iranians as the hegemon of that region. Now, the Sunnis were going to get their bit. The Sunnis of the Muslim Brotherhood were supposed to get North Africa. That didn't work out so well, but that was the idea. That the Iranians would have their Shiite crescent across the Middle East, but to ensure that and cement that, they had to have nukes, or they believe they did. It is a sine qua non for the regime in any case. And Obama wanted to help them with that. Then that's where we get this abomination of a deal, which began to be negotiated in secret when John Kerry was then chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee back around 2000. Oh, it's got to go back to about 2011 when it first started in secret using Oman. The Sultan Qaboos offered Oman as the place for them to meet secretly. That was the beginning on up through when Kerry becomes Secretary of State. By the way, fun fact, John Kerry was first introduced to then Iranian ambassador to the United Nations, Javad Zarif, in the early 2000s, maybe about 2002 or so, again when he was still in the Senate, John Kerry. That relationship really bore out for the Iranians all these many years later, as John Kerry was the lead negotiator, first as Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman, later then as Secretary of State under President Obama. I hold that he was essentially recruited. I mean that in the intelligence sense of the word recruited. Whether he was witting of that or acquiesced to that or not, I don't know. But he was recruited nevertheless, and the Iranians knew it.
I like that little fact. Thank you for that. The JPOA or JCPOA has what is called a Section T, paragraph 82.2, that says a dual-use equipment, multi-point explosive detonation systems.
Yep.
And you mentioned earlier that Iran is supposed to report certain things to the IAEA, but it seems like that little section right there, given the missiles that they're launching and all these other kinds of weird things that they're doing, Section T 82.2 would be a single violation. Did I get that wrong? Okay.
Not at all wrong. You are spot on, as usual, of course. Yes, that is a section which very specifically lays out the activities that would be prohibited, specifically because they could be lead-ons to the development of a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked me something a bit ago that I didn't really answer completely, and that was about the possible military dimension. So the IAEA Governor's Board files quarterly reports about the Iranian nuclear program, and those are posted online at its site, the IAEA, and anyone can read them, and I do read them. And I want to point you and your listeners' attention to one that was published in November 2011. This one was incredibly revealing, I think. And it listed in that report what the IAEA called possible military dimensions, or PMDs for short, of the Iranian nuclear program. Now, keep in mind, there had never been a time, and to this date, there has never been a time when Iran did not have a clandestine nuclear weapons program post-1988. Now, in this list that the November 2011 IAEA report goes into some detail about are things involving the development of nuclear warheads, the development of the explosive charges, or exploding bridge wires, it's sometimes called, or triggers to set off the implosion sequence of a nuclear weapon and the hemispheres of a nuclear bomb. All sorts of very specific items that clearly indicated at that time, November 2011, the IAEA knew Iran was working on nuclear warheads. Now, those things were supposed to have been resolved before, I guess, what they called implementation date of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. But instead of actually resolving them, and there was a list, I think it numbered maybe 12 items, maybe one of those had been resolved, and the remaining 11 were never resolved. They were simply done away with. They were swept under the rug, and the IAEA certified to make the JCPOA go into effect that all was well, everything's fine, we're satisfied. Well, they weren't satisfied, and neither are we. And Iran obviously is still working on pretty much all of those things, and certainly in collaboration with the North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un.
Thank you for saying that. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with Clare Lopez, Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Policy Security. Remarkable, very specific, great delivery, easy to understand, and thank you. We could discuss this for probably 3 hours. It's kind of hard to compress it all in 25 minutes.
It is. There's a lot to it. But
thank you.
You know, we got to get out of this deal. We got to ditch the deal. Please, President Trump, ditch the deal. Don't just recertify. Ditch the deal entirely. And then think about how we can help the Iranian people to achieve their liberty and get a regime that has oppressed them for decades out of power, and instead bring the Iranian people to their true liberty and the ability to choose their own government.
Well said. Thank you, Clare. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. We'll see you again real soon.